part for most people when they're watching.
So the first thing you need is a good source of Concord grapes. We're over here in Eastern Washington picking them up. This particular farmer is contracted to Welch's, but he lets a few pickers come through and pick up grapes. So that's what we're going to do, and get a few hundred pounds of grapes, and we'll start with that. So that's about 225 pounds of Concord and about 24 pounds of Niagara. We typically just juice the Concord, but the Niagaras were a bonus, so we'll take those. Okay, so this part of the process is probably by far the most time consuming. If you can get extra help on this, it'll make your process go a lot faster, a lot easier. And there's some argument to whether it's even necessary. Some people feel if you put the grapes in with the stems on, that it doesn't really make much difference, and certainly does make the process go quicker. As you can see, you just pull the grapes out, pull them off the stem, discard the stem, and repeat. So it's pretty much all there is to the stemming piece of this.
You get more of them then if you just de-stem.
These are quart jars by Kerr and Ball and a number of other suppliers, and they've been washed, and
No, this is overflowing.
so these are quart jars by Kerr and Bell, and they've been washed, and once you wash them, they need to be heated, and you just heat them by keeping them in the oven at about 180 degrees. So they're roughly the same temperature as the grape juice when it goes into the jar. Okay. So this jar has just been pulled out of the oven, so it's hot. It just releases the clamp there, and fresh grape juice, no additives. Pretty cool. Comes up to just about a 3/4 of an inch from the top of the jar. It's got another jar there to catch the drips with. We heat the lids up in the boiling water so the rubber softens. That's important for the sealing process.
And sometimes they stick together.
Yeah, they do.
You can find there's one that's not stuck.
You just set it right on top of the jar like that. Put a sealing ring on there. Screw it down till it's fairly tight. The jar is pretty hot, so it's kind of hard to get any tension on unless you can grab both sides of it. And there it is. And then you set it over someplace to cool. And that's the process. So the question is, what do you do with this stuff when you're done? What you do is you dump this into cheesecloth.
Which is in a colander.
Yeah, which is, and you make sure the cheesecloth is in a colander, and the colander's got something underneath it to catch juice. Then you tighten the cheesecloth down, and you squeeze as much of that juice out of there as you possibly can. When you're done with that, you pour the juice you get out of that back into here. And of course you re-jar that juice as it comes through.
There you go. Dump that one.
And then when you're done with that, you can either compost it or yard waste it, whatever your favorite flavor is. When you look at this, you can't really tell how much juice is in there. Do we have enough for a full jar or not? So sometimes we'll shoot a test jar and just to see, check the quantity. And looks like this is going to be more than, maybe, we'll see. And the reason we're doing this is because when the jars are clean and sterilized and hot, you want them to be hot when they're running juice into them. So in this case, it's questionable.
So you can put it back in.
So what you do when you're done with it, you figure out how much juice you got. So in this case, I'm thinking I don't have enough. You just pour it back in. These potholder gloves come in handy. And all this stuff is boiling hot. Another important piece of this is that, as you can see when you look at the bottom reservoir there on that 3-stack pan, you can't tell whether there's water in there or not. You got to lift it off like that to tell. And it's really a two-man operation to get water poured back in. This has got plenty because we just filled it. But if that runs dry, you will warp your pan and maybe wreck it altogether. So, other thing you watch is you watch the level of the cooked grapes, and they're down to about 1/3 of what they were when it was full. You're pretty much done. That one's pretty close.
As compared to...
Of course, that's what it looks like right after you fill it. And that's when it's all cooked. The colander that's ready to go into the steamer. So this is a stainless steel canning steamer, and you can find them online. You'll notice that you've got the bottom compartment that goes, that's the reservoir. You boil water in there, and then the next compartment up is, that's where it catches the grape juice. The next compartment up, that's where the colander sits, and obviously the lid's on top. And
you see some juice in the tube.
Right.
So you know.
Let you know that you can open up that clamp and fill up that jar.
Alright, so there's also the sealing and storing of these. First you need to make sure that they're sealed. After you can them, you're setting them someplace to cool, you'll hear a little pop as the lid, this lid here, sucks itself down. And then after the next day, or I should say the next day when they're all cool, you can just go and push on the lid gently to make sure that there's no give. If there's any give, then it's not sealed. You can see it's concave. You can kind of see if I can get the angle there. You can see that they're just barely concave, and that will also tell you there's a vacuum in there and there's a good seal. Once you have a good seal on these, they'll should store pretty much indefinitely. We've had good juice out of a 10-year-old jar, and to that end you want to make sure you label them. In a moment here I'm just going to put dates. I'm going to use a Sharpie, and I'm going to put dates here on the top, just month and day, tell when they were canned, and that's good. You want to store them in a cool, dry place, preferably indoors. A garage would work, but indoors is a little bit better, just to make sure they don't get down low enough to freezing. If they freeze, they'll probably break the seal.